You think detachment means you don't care. That is your first mistake. You think being unbothered means being cold, passive, disconnected from life. That is your second mistake. The Buddha never taught numbness, he taught freedom. Most people are not suffering because of what happens to them. They are suffering because they are entangled in everything. Every word, every opinion, every delay, every rejection, every message left unread. Your mind reacts to everything like a leaf in a storm, and then you wonder why you are exhausted. Detachment is not weakness. It is precision. It is power. It is the ability to choose what deserves your energy. Listen carefully, because if you understand this deeply, your entire life will become lighter. One attachment is the root of your disturbance. The Buddha said craving is the origin of suffering, not events, not people, not circumstances. Craving. Pause and really look at that. Most people spend their lives trying to rearrange the outside world. They change jobs, they change partners, they move cities, they unfollow people, they block numbers, they chase new goals. And yet, the disturbance follows them everywhere. Why? Because the problem was never the outside. The disturbance begins the moment the mind says, "This must go my way." You are not upset because someone spoke harshly. You are upset because you are attached to being respected at all times. You are not shattered because someone misunderstood you. You are shattered because you are attached to being seen correctly. You are not anxious because plans changed. You are anxious because you are attached to certainty. Attachment is the invisible contract you write with reality. It says, "I will only be at peace if things unfold according to my preference." And reality never signed that contract. Look carefully at your daily frustrations. Someone replies late, someone cancels, someone disagrees, traffic slows, the weather changes, the body gets sick, the market shifts, plans collapse. Each event is neutral in itself. It simply happens. But the mind adds resistance. This should not be happening. That resistance is craving. Craving is not only desire for pleasure, it is desire for control, it is desire for permanence, it is desire for validation, it is desire for the world to obey your internal script. You have a script for how people should treat you. You have a script for how your career should unfold. You have a script for how your relationships should feel. You even have a script for how your spiritual journey should progress. When life deviates from that script, you suffer. Notice something important. The pain is not only in what happened. The pain is in the gap between what happened and what you demanded should happen. The bigger the demand, the bigger the suffering. Imagine holding a glass of water tightly. The tighter you grip, the more your hand begins to ache. The water itself is not the problem. The gripping is. Attachment is gripping. You grip identity. I must be seen as strong. You grip reputation. I must be admired. You grip relationships. This person must stay. You grip outcomes. This must succeed. And then life moves, because life always moves. Impermanence is not a theory. It is the law of existence. Everything shifts, everything changes, everything decays or transforms. But attachment whispers, "Not this, not now, not for me." So you fight. You fight change. You fight loss. You fight uncertainty. You fight other people's freedom to behave differently than you expect. And fighting reality is exhausting. Detachment does not mean you stop caring. It means you stop clinging. You can prefer respect without demanding it. You can work hard without being enslaved by the result. You can love deeply without trying to cage the other person. You can set goals without tying your worth to their outcome. This is the subtle shift. Attachment says, "I need this to be okay." Detachment says, I would like this, but my peace does not depend on it. When your peace depends on conditions, you are fragile. When your peace comes from within, you are stable. Most people confuse attachment with commitment. They think letting go means becoming passive. That is not what the Buddha taught. You still act. You still care. You still show up. You still love. But you release the demand that the universe reward you exactly as you expect. Imagine planting a seed. You water it, you protect it, you give it sunlight, but you do not scream at it to grow faster. You do not tear open the soil to check its progress every hour. You do your part, and you allow nature to do its part. That is detachment. You engage fully, but you do not strangle the outcome. So, ask yourself honestly, where in your life are you trembling because of attachment? Are you attached to someone's approval? Are you attached to a version of yourself that no longer exists? Are you attached to a future that has not arrived? Are you attached to an image of how others should behave? Each attachment is a hook, and every hook gives the world something to pull. When you release the hook, the pulling stops. This does not mean you become emotionless. Emotions will still arise, sadness will come, joy will come, anger will come, but you do not build your identity around them. You do not say, this must never happen again. You allow, you observe, you respond wisely. When you stop demanding, you stop trembling. When you stop insisting, you stop resisting. And when you stop resisting reality, something surprising happens. You feel lighter, not because life became perfect, but because you are no longer at war with it. Attachment tightens the chest. Detachment softens the grip. And in that softening, you discover something powerful. Peace was never outside. It was buried under your demands. Reaction is a form of slavery. Every time you react without awareness, you surrender control. Understand this clearly. If someone can provoke you and instantly change your emotional state, they own that moment of your life. If a comment ruins your day, if a message shifts your mood, if a look from someone alters your confidence, then your inner world is not yours. It is rented out to external forces. That is not freedom. Most people believe they are independent thinkers, but watch closely how quickly their emotions swing. One compliment and they rise. One criticism and they fall. One delay and they panic. One disagreement and they explode. This is not strength. This is conditioning. Reaction is automatic. It is mechanical. It is the mind operating on habit. Someone speaks sharply and anger appears. Someone ignores you and insecurity appears. Someone succeeds and comparison appears. The reaction feels personal, but it is deeply impersonal. It is a chain of causes and conditions firing in the nervous system. The Buddha taught dependent origination. This arises because that arose. A trigger meets a memory meets an identity meets fear, and suddenly there is emotion. But here is the crucial truth. Between stimulus and reaction, there is a gap. In that gap lies your power. Most people never enter that gap. They live entirely on the surface of impulse. The moment something touches their ego, they defend. The moment they feel slighted, they retaliate. The moment they feel uncomfortable, they escape. They call it authenticity, but it is actually enslavement. If your anger can be predicted, you can be controlled. If your insecurity can be triggered, you can be manipulated. If your attention can be captured instantly, you can be distracted endlessly. Reaction is predictable, awareness is not. The untrained mind reacts to protect identity. The ego says, I must not be disrespected. I must not be ignored. I must not be wrong. And so it pushes you to respond immediately, to assert, to correct, to defend. But the awakened mind asks a different question. Is this worth my peace? That question alone dissolves half of human conflict. Look at your recent disturbances. How many of them truly required your reaction? How many arguments improved your life? How many impulsive responses strengthened your relationships? How many defensive explanations actually brought you peace? Very few. Reaction gives a temporary sense of control. It feels powerful in the moment. You say something sharp, you send the message, you assert yourself. For a brief second, the ego feels satisfied. But afterward, there is residue, regret, rumination, escalation, more disturbance. Awareness, on the other hand, may feel uncomfortable at first. When you choose not to react, the ego feels restless. It wants expression, it wants validation, it wants to prove something. Sit with that discomfort, because that discomfort is the breaking of a chain. When you pause, you interrupt the old pattern. You create space. You observe the emotion instead of becoming it. Anger arises, but instead of saying, "I am angry," you notice anger is present. Do you see the difference? One binds you. The other liberates you. When you identify with the reaction, you act from it. When you observe it, you are no longer trapped inside it. This is not suppression. Suppression pushes emotion down. Awareness lets it rise and pass. A reaction is like a spark. If you throw dry wood onto it, it becomes a fire. If you simply watch it without feeding it, it burns out on its own. Most of your suffering is self-fed. You replay the insult. You rehearse the argument. You imagine what you should have said. You prepare for future confrontations. Each mental rehearsal strengthens the chain. But if you pause and breathe, if you observe without acting, something extraordinary happens. The emotion peaks, and then it fades. All emotions are impermanent, yet reaction tries to make them permanent through action. The Buddha did not teach passivity. He taught wise response. There is a difference. Reaction is unconscious and immediate. Response is conscious and deliberate. Reaction says, "I must answer now." Response says, "I will answer when clarity returns." Reaction is driven by ego. Response is guided by awareness. When you cultivate this pause, you become difficult to control. People may try to provoke you, they may try to extract emotion, they may try to pull you into drama. But if there is no instant reaction, the hook does not catch. Imagine a lake. When a stone is thrown into it, ripples form. That is natural. But if the lake is shallow and turbulent, the ripples become chaos. If the lake is deep and still, the ripples dissolve quickly. Depth is cultivated through mindfulness. Meditation trains you to watch sensations without immediately acting on them. You feel the itch, but do not scratch. You feel the thought, but do not chase it. You feel the impulse, but do not obey it. Over time, this discipline spreads into daily life. Someone criticizes you. There is sensation, tightness in the chest, heat in the face, a thought forming. Instead of speaking instantly, you observe. And in that observation, freedom appears. Not because nothing affects you, but because you are no longer owned by what affects you. This is true power. Not dominance over others, dominance over your own impulses. When you master your reactions, you reclaim your mind. And when your mind is no longer easily provoked, you are no longer easily controlled. That is what it means to be unbothered. Not numb, not cold, but free. Detachment is not indifference, it is clarity. Most people hear the word detachment and immediately misunderstand it. They imagine someone cold, distant, emotionally unavailable, disconnected from life. They assume detachment means you stop caring, stop loving, stop participating. That assumption is wrong, and it keeps many people trapped in unnecessary suffering. Detachment is not the absence of love, it is the absence of clinging. There is a profound difference between the two. Clinging says, "I cannot be whole without this." Love says, "I appreciate this deeply, but my existence does not depend on it." Clinging tries to possess. Love allows freedom. Clinging fears loss constantly. Love understands that loss is part of life. When you confuse attachment with love, you create fear where there could have been peace. You begin monitoring the other person's behavior. You interpret small changes as threats. You overanalyze words, tone, and timing. You become hyper-vigilant because you believe your stability depends on them staying exactly as they are. That is not love, that is dependence. True detachment allows you to love more purely because you are no longer trying to extract security from the other person. You are not squeezing them for reassurance. You are not demanding that they behave in ways that soothe your insecurity. You are not building your identity on their consistency. You remain grounded within yourself. Detachment is clarity about what is within your control and what is not. Your actions are within your control. Your intentions are within your control. Your effort is within your control. But the reactions, decisions, and emotions of others are not. The outcomes of situations are not. The unfolding of time is not. When you blur this boundary, you suffer. You attempt to control what cannot be controlled. You take responsibility for things that were never yours to carry. You internalize other people's moods as if they are reflections of your worth. You assume that if something ends, it means you failed. You assume that if someone leaves, it means you were not enough. Clarity dissolves these illusions. Detachment says, "I will give my best. I will show up with sincerity. I will act with integrity, and then I will release the rest." That release is not laziness. It is wisdom. It is recognizing the limits of your influence. Consider how much anxiety comes from trying to manage perceptions. You want everyone to understand you correctly. You want your intentions to be seen accurately. You want your efforts to be acknowledged. So you explain repeatedly. You justify. You defend. You overextend yourself to avoid being misunderstood. But you cannot control interpretation. Every person filters you through their own history, fears, and expectations. Even if you speak perfectly, someone may still misread you. If your peace depends on universal understanding, you will never be calm. Detachment frees you from that impossible task. You still communicate clearly. You still express yourself honestly, but you do not collapse if someone chooses to misunderstand you. You understand that their perception belongs to them. This is clarity. It is also clarity about impermanence. Everything changes. Relationships evolve, careers shift, bodies age, emotions rise and fall. When you attach to the idea that something must remain as it is, you resist the fundamental nature of existence. Detachment accepts change without panic. This does not mean you enjoy loss. It does not mean you celebrate endings. It means you recognize that holding tighter does not prevent change. It only increases suffering when change inevitably comes. When you hold something gently, you experience it more fully. You appreciate it while it is present, because you are not desperately trying to freeze it in time. You allow it to breathe. And if it leaves, you grieve without losing yourself. Detachment also clarifies your relationship with success and failure. If you are attached to outcomes, every setback becomes an identity crisis. You do not simply fail at something, you become a failure. You do not simply lose an opportunity, you become unworthy. But when you detach from the outcome and anchor yourself in effort, setbacks become information rather than condemnation. You learn, adjust, and continue. Your worth remains stable because it was never tied to the result in the first place. Clarity separates who you are from what happens. Without detachment, you merge your identity with circumstances. When circumstances shake, you shake. When circumstances collapse, you collapse. With detachment, you remain distinct. Circumstances move, but you are not fused to them. This is not emotional suppression. It is emotional maturity. You still feel joy. You still feel sadness. You still feel affection. But you are not dragged unconsciously by every wave. You observe the emotion, experience it fully, and allow it to pass without constructing a permanent story around it. Detachment removes exaggeration. It removes the narrative that says, "This must last forever," or "This should never have happened," or "I cannot survive this." It replaces those stories with a simple understanding. This is part of the unfolding of life. When you operate from clarity, your relationships become healthier, your work becomes steadier, and your mind becomes quieter. You are no longer constantly scanning for threats to your identity. You are no longer demanding guarantees from an impermanent world. You can care deeply without fear dominating you. You can commit without clinging. You can strive without desperation. Detachment is not emotional distance. It is emotional balance. It is the recognition that you are complete before, during, and after every experience. Nothing external is required to validate your existence. Nothing external can permanently define you. When you truly understand this, you move through life differently. You participate fully, but you are not entangled. You love openly, but you are not possessed by fear. You act sincerely, but you are not enslaved by outcomes. That is clarity, and clarity is strength. 4. Your ego wants to be bothered. If you are honest with yourself, you will notice something uncomfortable. Part of you enjoys being bothered. It sounds strange, but look closely at your mind. When someone criticizes you, why do you replay their words over and over? When someone disrespects you, why do you imagine 10 different ways you could respond? When someone doubts you, why do you feel a burning urge to prove them wrong? Because the ego feeds on significance. The ego does not care whether the attention is positive or negative. It only cares that it feels important. Being praised makes it feel elevated. Being attacked makes it feel dramatic. In both cases, it feels central. To the ego, being ignored is worse than being insulted. When something bothers you, it activates your sense of self. It says, "This is about me. I must respond. I must defend. I must assert." The ego thrives on this internal urgency. It wants to feel like the main character in every situation. That is why small comments can feel huge. That is why minor disagreements can spiral into emotional storms. The ego magnifies events because it interprets everything as a reflection of identity. Someone disagrees with your opinion. The ego hears, "You are wrong." Someone sets a boundary. The ego hears, "You are not valued." Someone succeeds. The ego hears, "You are behind." The mind immediately personalizes what may not even be personal. This is how disturbance is created. The Buddha taught that the sense of a fixed, solid self is an illusion, yet the ego constantly tries to reinforce that illusion. It builds narratives, it defends images, it clings to roles. It wants to be seen as intelligent, strong, attractive, spiritual, successful, right. When any of those images are threatened, the ego reacts like it is fighting for survival. But what is actually being threatened? An image, a concept, a story. When someone questions you, they are not attacking your existence. They are brushing against an identity you have constructed. But because you are attached to that identity, it feels like an attack on your core. So you become bothered, Notice how quickly the mind wants to explain itself. It wants to justify, to clarify, to correct every misunderstanding. It wants the record set straight. It wants others to see you exactly as you see yourself. Why? Because the ego cannot tolerate distortion. But here is the deeper truth. You cannot control how others perceive you. Their view of you is filtered through their own fears, biases, and experiences. You could speak perfectly and still be misunderstood. When you accept this, something powerful happens. You stop fighting every battle. You realize that not every comment requires correction. Not every insult requires response. Not every misunderstanding requires explanation. The ego says, if you do not respond, you look weak. Wisdom says, if you respond to everything, you look unstable. Silence often unsettles people more than reaction. When you do not take the bait, the dynamic shifts. The energy they expected from you does not arrive. The conflict they anticipated does not ignite. Your refusal to react exposes how much of conflict is fueled by ego. Ask yourself, how many arguments in your life were truly about truth? And how many were about pride? How many were about clarity? And how many were about proving you were right? How many were about growth? And how many were about defending an image? When you begin observing your ego instead of obeying it, you see how restless it is. It wants to comment, it wants to compare, it wants to compete, it wants to be acknowledged. But the awakened mind is not obsessed with being central. It understands that you are not the axis around which the world turns. People act according to their own conditioning. They speak from their own wounds. They project their own fears. Not everything is about you. When someone is rude, it may be their stress speaking. When someone dismisses you, it may be their insecurity speaking. When someone criticizes you harshly, it may be their own dissatisfaction speaking. But the ego translates everything as personal, and so it demands reaction. Being unbothered does not mean you allow injustice or abuse. It means you are no longer triggered by every scratch to your image. You respond when necessary, calmly and deliberately, rather than impulsively. The ego seeks drama because drama feels alive. Stillness feels boring to it. When nothing disturbs you, the ego feels invisible. But that invisibility is freedom. When you no longer need to win every exchange, you conserve enormous energy. When you no longer need to be right in every discussion, your mind relaxes. When you no longer chase validation, your confidence becomes quiet and stable. The ego wants to be constantly stimulated. It wants emotional highs and lows. It wants conflict and resolution. It wants attention. Detachment denies it that fuel. And at first, the ego will resist. It will whisper, say something. It will say, do not let that slide. It will insist, you cannot ignore this. Observe that voice. It is not wisdom. It is insecurity protecting an illusion. When you let the urge pass without acting on it, you weaken the ego's grip. You begin to see that many disturbances were optional. They only continued because you participated in them. Imagine how different your life would feel if you were not easily offended, not easily provoked, not easily pulled into drama. How much lighter would your days be? How much clearer would your decisions become? True strength is not loud. It does not shout over others. It does not scramble to defend itself. It stands calmly, knowing that identity does not need constant protection. When the ego stops demanding to be the center of every situation, your mind becomes spacious. And in that space, peace becomes possible. Your ego wants to be bothered, but you do not have to obey it. 5 Emotional stillness disarms the world. Most people operate on emotional reflex. They push, you push back. They raise their voice, you raise yours. They withdraw, you chase. They criticize, you defend. This is the rhythm of unconscious living. And because almost everyone participates in this rhythm, very few people know what to do when it stops. Emotional stillness disrupts the pattern. When someone expects a reaction and does not receive it, the dynamic shifts instantly. The argument they were prepared to escalate has no fuel. The tension they were ready to amplify meets silence instead of resistance. It is not that you are passive, it is that you are stable. There is a difference. Instability reacts to instability. Stability absorbs it. Imagine throwing a stone into a shallow puddle. Water splashes violently. Now imagine throwing the same stone into a deep lake. The surface ripples, but the depth remains undisturbed. Depth is what disarms the world. When you cultivate emotional depth, you stop being predictable. People cannot easily pull you into drama because your identity is not fragile. They cannot easily provoke you because you are not seeking validation. They cannot easily intimidate you because you are not dependent on their approval. Stillness creates psychological uncertainty in others. Someone tries to insult you. You remain calm. They expect irritation. They expect defense. They expect escalation. Instead, they meet composure. The power they thought they had evaporates. This is not manipulation. It is self-mastery. Emotional stillness does not mean you suppress anger or sadness. It means you do not let those emotions dictate your behavior. You feel them, but you choose your response carefully. Most conflicts continue because both parties are reacting from wounded ego. One person feels disrespected, the other feels misunderstood. Each tries to assert control. Neither is actually listening. When one person becomes still, the pattern cannot sustain itself. Stillness forces clarity. If someone is being unreasonable and you remain calm, their behavior becomes more visible. If someone is projecting insecurity and you do not react defensively, their projection loses momentum. Your calm becomes a mirror. But understand something deeper. Emotional stillness is not only about how others behave, it is about how you experience life. When your mind is reactive, every inconvenience feels like an attack. Every delay feels personal. Every disagreement feels threatening. You live in constant micro-conflict. When your mind is still, you see events more clearly. You separate fact from interpretation. You notice how often you were adding unnecessary meaning to neutral situations. Someone cancels a plan. The fact is simple. The plan changed. The reactive mind adds a story. They do not value me. I am not important. This always happens. Stillness prevents the story from taking over. In that prevention, peace remains intact. Emotional stillness also protects your energy in competitive environments. Whether in work, relationships, or social spaces, people test each other unconsciously. They push boundaries. They observe reactions. They assess weakness. If you respond to every push, you signal instability. If you panic under pressure, you signal vulnerability. If you over-explain yourself constantly, you signal insecurity. But when you remain steady, when your tone does not fluctuate wildly, when your body language stays composed, you signal something different. You signal control. Control over your impulses. Control over your ego. Control over your emotional temperature. That kind of control commands quiet respect. It is not loud. It is not dramatic. It is not aggressive. It is grounded. People may not consciously articulate it, but they feel it. They sense that you are not easily moved. And when you are not easily moved, you are not easily manipulated. Stillness also transforms your internal world. When you stop reacting immediately, you give your nervous system time to settle. Your breath slows. Your thoughts become clearer. You begin responding from awareness rather than survival instinct. Over time, this rewires you. Situations that once triggered anxiety now feel manageable. Criticism that once consumed you now feels informational. Rejection that once devastated you now feels like redirection. You become less fragile. And fragility is what makes people controllable. The world often operates on emotional leverage. Advertisements provoke insecurity. Social media provokes comparison. News provokes fear. Conversations provoke outrage. If your emotional state is easily hijacked, you are constantly being steered by external forces. Emotional stillness removes that leverage. You watch the drama without entering it. You hear the criticism without collapsing. You face uncertainty without spiraling. This does not make you cold. It makes you sovereign. There is a quiet dignity in someone who does not need to perform emotional extremes to feel alive. There is power in someone who can walk away from unnecessary conflict without feeling defeated. There is strength in someone who can say less and mean more. Stillness is not weakness. It is restraint guided by awareness. When your mind is steady, your words become intentional, your actions become measured, your presence becomes calm. And in a world addicted to noise and reaction, calm is rare. Rarity commands attention. Emotional stillness disarms the world, not because it dominates others, but because it removes the hooks that others rely on. If there is nothing to pull, nothing moves you. And when nothing moves you without your permission, you are truly powerful. 6. Detachment protects your energy. Most people are not physically exhausted. They are mentally entangled. They say they are tired from work, tired from responsibilities, tired from people. But if you examine closely, much of that fatigue does not come from action. It comes from rumination. You replay conversations long after they ended. You imagine arguments that have not happened. You anticipate rejection before it occurs. You obsess over outcomes you cannot control. This constant mental rehearsal drains more energy than physical labor. The body can recover from effort. The mind struggles to recover from constant attachment. Attachment keeps the nervous system activated. It keeps you in subtle fight or flight mode. Even when you are sitting still, your mind is racing. Even when nothing is happening externally, internally there is noise. Detachment interrupts this cycle. When you detach, you stop carrying what is not yours to carry. You stop trying to manage every variable. You stop assuming responsibility for other people's emotions. You stop attempting to predict and control every future scenario. You conserve energy. Energy is your most valuable resource. Not money, not status, not approval. Energy. With stable energy, you think clearly. With stable energy, you respond wisely. With stable energy, you pursue meaningful work. Without it, even small tasks feel overwhelming. Attachment scatters energy. Consider how much energy is consumed by comparison. You see someone's success and immediately measure yourself against it. You analyze timelines, you question your pace. You create pressure where none was required. That pressure is self-created attachment to an imagined standard. Now consider resentment. Someone wronged you. The event lasted minutes, but you replay it for weeks. You revisit it before sleep. You rehearse what you should have said. You imagine future confrontations. The original event is over. The ongoing exhaustion is self-generated through attachment. Detachment does not mean pretending nothing happened. It means recognizing that repeatedly reliving it does not change it. It only extends its impact on your nervous system. There is a reason meditation emphasizes returning to the breath. The breath anchors you in the present moment. Attachment pulls you into past regret or future anxiety. When you are attached to outcomes, you cannot rest. You check your phone repeatedly. You monitor responses. You analyze tone. You scan for signs. When you are detached, you act sincerely and then release. You send the message and let it be. You submit the work and let it be. You express your feelings and let it be. You do not hover mentally over every result. This release preserves energy. Most people leak energy through overexposure to drama. They involve themselves in conflicts that do not concern them. They engage in debates that will not transform their lives. They consume information that triggers emotion but offers no practical value. Detachment asks a simple question: is this worth my attention? Attention is a form of energy allocation. Where your attention goes, your vitality follows. If you constantly feed your attention to outrage, comparison, fear, and gossip, your internal state will reflect that diet. You will feel scattered and tense. If you guard your attention carefully, your mind becomes clearer. Detachment is selective engagement. You do not attend every argument you are invited to. You do not answer every provocation. You do not internalize every opinion. You do not adopt every expectation placed upon you. You choose deliberately. This choice creates space, and in that space, your energy stabilizes. There is also the attachment to identity. You may be attached to being seen as helpful, strong, intelligent, kind. So you overextend yourself. You say yes when you want to say no. You take on responsibilities that exceed your capacity. You suppress your own needs to maintain an image. Eventually, you burn out, not because you are weak, but because you are attached to a role. Detachment allows you to act from authenticity rather than performance. You help when you genuinely can. You rest when you genuinely need to. You set boundaries without guilt because your worth is not dependent on constant approval. Boundaries are energy protection. Without detachment, boundaries feel selfish. With clarity, boundaries feel necessary. You cannot maintain inner stillness if you are constantly leaking energy through overcommitment and overthinking. The Buddha taught the middle way balance, not indulgence, not extreme denial. Detachment supports balance because it prevents extremes driven by craving. Craving says, more success, more validation, more control. Fear says, avoid loss, avoid criticism, avoid discomfort. Both extremes consume energy. Detachment says, enough. Enough striving for identity. Enough rehearsing past wounds. Enough chasing approval. Enough anticipating disaster. When you say enough internally, your system relaxes. Your breathing deepens. Your thoughts slow. Your posture softens. Energy returns. And with that energy, you become more effective in the areas that truly matter. Your work improves because your mind is not fragmented. Your relationships improve because you are not operating from desperation. Your decisions improve because they are not clouded by emotional turbulence. Detachment does not reduce ambition, it refines it. It removes frantic urgency and replaces it with steady focus. You act with intention rather than anxiety. You conserve energy for growth instead of wasting it on unnecessary battles. Ask yourself honestly, where is your energy leaking? Is it leaking through constant comparison? Through unresolved resentment? Through fear of how others perceive you? Through attachment to outcomes you cannot guarantee? Each leak can be sealed through awareness and release. When you protect your energy, you protect your clarity. When you protect your clarity, you protect your peace. And when your peace is intact, you become difficult to disturb. That is not withdrawal from life. That is intelligent engagement with it. 7 true power is inner untouchability. There is a state of mind that very few people ever reach. Not because it is impossible, but because most people are too attached to their reactions to even attempt it. Inner untouchability does not mean you feel nothing. It means nothing owns you. Praise does not inflate you. Criticism does not shatter you. Gain does not intoxicate you. Loss does not erase you. You remain steady. This steadiness is not coldness. It is understanding. The Buddha repeatedly pointed to impermanence. Everything that arises passes away. Emotions arise and pass. Success arises and passes. Relationships arise and pass. Even the body itself is temporary. But most people live as if things are permanent. They cling to praise as if it will last. They fear insult as if it defines them forever. They treat temporary situations as eternal verdicts on their worth. That is why they are easily disturbed. Inner untouchability begins when you truly accept impermanence, not intellectually, but deeply. When someone praises you, you understand it is a passing sound shaped by their perception. When someone criticizes you, you understand it is also a passing sound shaped by their perception. Neither is absolute truth. Neither is permanent. If you attach to praise, you become addicted to it. You begin shaping your behavior to maintain it. You fear losing it. You compromise authenticity to preserve approval. If you attach to criticism, you become defensive or insecure. You replay it. You internalize it. You build narratives around it. But when you see both as temporary expressions of conditions, their power over you weakens. Imagine a mountain during a storm. Wind strikes it. Rain pours over it. Thunder echoes around it. The mountain does not panic. It does not resist. It does not chase the storm away. It remains. Inner untouchability is mountain-like awareness. Life will bring storms. There will be moments of rejection, moments of misunderstanding, moments of unexpected loss, moments where your plans collapse. If your identity is fused with outcomes, each storm feels like destruction. If your identity is rooted in awareness itself, storms pass through without uprooting you. This does not mean you do not feel grief when something ends. You will feel it. You do not become stone. You become stable. You allow sadness without letting it redefine your entire existence. You allow disappointment without concluding that life is unfair or you are inadequate. Untouchability is not emotional suppression. It is emotional resilience grounded in wisdom. When you understand that all experiences are temporary, you stop panicking at their arrival. When you understand that every state changes, you stop clinging to pleasant states and stop fearing unpleasant ones as if they will last forever. This is freedom from psychological volatility. Most people ride emotional extremes. They are ecstatic when things go well and devastated when things go wrong. Their self-worth rises and falls like a stock market chart. Inner untouchability flattens those extremes. Joy is experienced deeply but not clung to. Pain is experienced honestly but not dramatized. You remain centered. This centering creates an unusual presence. When others try to provoke you, they encounter calm. When others attempt to intimidate you, they encounter steadiness. When others attempt to impress you, they encounter composure. You are not easily hooked. Hooks only work when there is something to catch. If you are desperate for approval, praise hooks you. If you are terrified of rejection, criticism hooks you. If you are attached to control, uncertainty hooks you. When you release these attachments, hooks fall away. People may still try to influence you, but their leverage weakens. You begin responding from principle rather than emotion. You act according to values rather than impulses. You choose what aligns with clarity instead of what soothes insecurity. This is true power. Not power over others, power over self. And this power is quiet. It does not need to announce itself. It does not need to dominate conversations. It does not need to prove superiority. It simply remains unshaken. Think about how much of your life has been shaped by fear of being judged. How many decisions were influenced by what others might think? How many risks were avoided because of potential criticism? How many compromises were made to preserve image? When you become internally untouchable, judgment loses its grip. You no longer shape your identity around fluctuating opinions. You listen to feedback when it is constructive. You discard it when it is projection. But you do not collapse under it. Your sense of self becomes less reactive and more rooted. This rootedness creates courage. You can walk away from unhealthy dynamics without feeling destroyed. You can accept endings without feeling erased. You can pursue goals without being paralyzed by potential failure, because your core remains intact. Inner untouchability is the culmination of detachment. It is what happens when you consistently observe rather than react, release rather than cling, and accept rather than resist. It is not indifference to life. It is deep participation without dependency. You still care. You still strive. You still love. You still feel. But nothing external becomes the foundation of your stability. When stability comes from within, circumstances lose their ability to control you. That is what it means to be unbothered at the deepest level. Not numb, not detached from humanity, but free from being owned by it. And when nothing owns your mind, you move through the world with a quiet, unshakable power. 8. Letting go is the final form of strength. Most people think strength means holding on to relationships, holding on to status, holding on to arguments, holding on to identity, holding on to being right. They believe endurance is measured by how tightly they can grip. But look closely at your own suffering. It rarely comes from what left. It comes from your refusal to release what already ended. Letting go feels terrifying because the ego equates release with loss of control. It says, if you let go, you lose. It says, if you stop fighting, you surrender. It says, if you release this, you will have nothing. But the Buddha taught something radical. Clinging is the cause of suffering, not loss itself. Loss is natural. Clinging is optional. When something changes and you resist it internally, you create friction. That friction becomes anxiety, anger, regret, resentment. You replay scenarios. You imagine alternate outcomes. You negotiate with the past in your head. But the past does not negotiate. Letting go begins when you accept that some chapters close without your permission. A relationship may end even if you gave your best. An opportunity may disappear even if you prepared. An image of yourself may collapse even if you were attached to it. Letting go does not mean denying grief. It means allowing grief without turning it into identity. There is a difference between "this hurts" and "this defines me." Most people confuse the two. They cling to pain because pain feels like proof that something mattered. They hold on to anger because anger feels like strength. They hold on to resentment because resentment feels like control. But these are illusions. Resentment binds you to the very thing you claim to want distance from. Anger keeps the past alive in your nervous system. Regret ties you to decisions that can no longer be altered. Letting go cuts those invisible cords. It is not dramatic, it is quiet. It is a decision made repeatedly, not once. Each time the mind revisits the past, you gently release it. Each time the ego wants to reopen an old wound, you observe it without feeding it. Each time you feel the urge to prove something to someone who already left, you pause and return to yourself. This repetition builds freedom. Letting go also applies to identity. You are attached to who you think you are. You cling to labels: successful, spiritual, intelligent, needed, admired. When circumstances threaten these labels, panic arises. But identity is fluid. You are not a fixed object. You are a process. Every experience reshapes you. If you cling to a past version of yourself, growth becomes painful. If you insist on remaining who you were, transformation feels like death. Letting go allows evolution. It allows you to admit you were wrong without collapsing. It allows you to change direction without feeling ashamed. It allows you to release outdated ambitions without feeling like a failure. Strength is not rigidity. Strength is adaptability. Look at nature. The tree that refuses to bend in strong wind breaks. The tree that sways survives. Water flows around obstacles. It does not shatter against them. Letting go is bending without breaking. It is flowing instead of colliding. Many people remain stuck not because life trapped them, but because they refuse to release what is no longer aligned. They cling to relationships out of fear of loneliness. They cling to jobs out of fear of uncertainty. They cling to narratives out of fear of meaninglessness. Fear fuels attachment, but attachment does not eliminate fear. It amplifies it. The more tightly you hold something, the more afraid you become of losing it. When you loosen your grip, fear diminishes. You begin to trust that even if something ends, you will remain. Even if circumstances shift, you will adapt. Even if outcomes disappoint, you will survive. This trust is not blind optimism. It is experiential wisdom built from observing impermanence again and again. Everything you once thought you could not survive losing, you eventually survived. Everything that once felt catastrophic eventually faded. Letting go aligns you with reality instead of fighting it. It does not mean passivity. You still act where action is possible. You still speak where speech is needed. You still strive where effort is meaningful. But when something is beyond your control, you release instead of resist. This is the final layer of being unbothered. It is not about appearing calm. It is about internal surrender to what is. When you stop wrestling with what has already happened, your mind becomes lighter. When you stop chasing what refuses to stay, your heart becomes steadier. When you stop forcing what does not align, your path becomes clearer. Letting go is not weakness. It is courage without drama. It is strength without aggression. It is confidence without attachment. And in that release, you discover something profound. You were never holding life together. Life was unfolding on its own. Your suffering came from trying to control the unfolding. When you let go, you do not lose yourself. You find the part of you that was never dependent on circumstances to begin with. That is freedom. And freedom is the highest form of power. 9. Nothing outside you defines you. If you want to understand why you are easily disturbed, look at what you use to define yourself. Do you define yourself by your success? By your relationship status? By how others speak about you? By how useful you are to people? By how productive you appear? As long as your identity is built on external conditions, your stability will always be fragile. Because external conditions change. The Buddha taught that what we call self is a collection of changing processes, thoughts, sensations, emotions, perceptions. None of them are permanent. Yet the mind tries to build a fixed identity from these shifting elements. You say, "I am successful." Then one failure shakes you. You say, "I am respected." Then one insult disturbs you. You say, "I am needed." Then one rejection destabilizes you. Why does this happen? Because you fused your identity with something temporary. When the temporary changes, you feel as if you are dissolving. This is the illusion. You are not your achievements. You are not your reputation. You are not your social role. You are not the praise you receive or the criticism you endure. Those are experiences passing through awareness, but you are not the passing content. You are the awareness in which it passes. When someone insults you, what actually happens? Sound waves travel through the air. Your brain interprets them. A sensation arises, a thought forms, emotion follows. But none of that is solid. It is a chain reaction. If you believe the insult defines you, you suffer. If you see it as an event occurring in consciousness, you remain stable. This does not mean you ignore constructive feedback. It means you do not collapse under projection. Most people walk through life constantly managing perception. They curate images, they monitor how they are seen, they adjust behavior to maintain approval. Their nervous system is tied to social feedback. One positive comment lifts them, one negative comment crushes them. That is not freedom. Freedom begins when you understand that perception is unstable. 10 people can see you in 10 different ways. Which one is the real you? None of them fully. Each person projects their own conditioning onto you. One sees confidence, another sees arrogance. One sees kindness, another sees weakness. One sees ambition, another sees selfishness. If you try to control every perception, you will exhaust yourself. If you build your identity on perception, you will constantly tremble. Detachment from external definition creates inner untouchability. You act according to values, not applause. You improve where improvement is needed, not where approval is demanded. You speak truthfully, not strategically to preserve image. There is a profound relief in no longer needing to be seen a certain way. When someone misunderstands you, you clarify once if necessary. If misunderstanding persists, you let it be. You do not chase correction endlessly. When someone praises you excessively, you accept it lightly. You do not inflate. You do not construct ego around it. When someone criticizes unfairly, you examine it calmly. If it contains truth, you adjust. If it does not, you release. Nothing sticks too deeply. This is what makes you difficult to manipulate. If your self-worth depends on praise, people can control you through flattery. If your self-worth fears criticism, people can control you through disapproval. But when your worth is internal, these tactics lose power. You begin to operate from principle rather than insecurity. This internal grounding also changes how you approach success and failure. Success becomes an event, not identity. You experience it, appreciate it, but you do not merge with it. Failure becomes feedback, not self-destruction. You learn, adjust, and continue. Your emotional state no longer swings violently based on circumstance. The mind becomes steady. Ask yourself honestly, who would you be if no one was watching? If there were no audience, no metrics, no comparisons, no applause, who would you be? That version of you is closer to truth. When you detach from external definition, you stop performing, you stop exaggerating, you stop shrinking, you stop competing unnecessarily. You simply act. And that simplicity carries quiet power. The world may still judge. It always will. The world may still compare. It always does. But judgment no longer defines you. Comparison no longer disturbs you. Because you understand something fundamental. Everything outside you is in motion. Reputation changes. Opinions shift. Roles evolve. Circumstances transform. If you anchor your identity to motion, you will constantly feel unstable. If you anchor your identity to awareness itself, to the observing presence behind all experience, you remain steady regardless of what moves around you. That is the deeper meaning of detachment, not detachment from life. Detachment from illusion, the illusion that you are the labels attached to you, the illusion that you are the narrative others construct about you, the illusion that your worth fluctuates with circumstance. When those illusions fall away, you do not become empty. You become free. And when nothing external defines you, nothing external can truly disturb you. 10. The unbothered mind is a disciplined mind. At this point, you might think being unbothered is a personality trait. It is not. It is discipline. No one is born emotionally untouchable. The reactive mind is natural. The ego is automatic. The impulse to defend, to chase, to argue, to prove, all of that is deeply conditioned. If you are easily triggered, that does not make you broken. It makes you untrained. The unbothered mind is built the same way physical strength is built, through repetition. Every time you pause instead of reacting, you strengthen it. Every time you release instead of clinging, you strengthen it. Every time you observe instead of identifying, you strengthen it. This is mental training. Most people want the result without the practice. They want to be calm without meditation. They want detachment without self-inquiry. They want inner peace while constantly feeding distraction, comparison, and stimulation. It does not work that way. If you consume chaos daily, your mind will become chaotic. If you indulge every emotional impulse, your reactions will become stronger. If you avoid silence, you will fear stillness. The unbothered mind is not created in comfort. It is created in awareness. You must catch yourself in real time. When irritation arises, notice it immediately. When jealousy appears, observe it without shame. When insecurity surfaces, examine it instead of masking it. Discipline begins with honesty. Most people do not want to admit that they are bothered. They hide it behind sarcasm. They disguise it as just being real. They label impulsiveness as authenticity. But awareness sees through that. If your mood shifts constantly based on other people's behavior, you are not stable yet. If you replay interactions for hours, you are not detached yet. If you feel compelled to respond to every slight, you are not free yet. That is not judgment. That is diagnosis. And diagnosis is the beginning of mastery. The Buddha's path was not mystical in the way people imagine. It was practical. Observe the mind. Understand its patterns. Reduce suffering through insight and discipline. Meditation is not about escaping the world. It is about training attention. When you sit and watch your breath, you are strengthening your ability to remain steady amid distraction. When thoughts arise and you do not chase them, you are practicing non-attachment in small form. Those small practices translate into daily life. Someone provokes you. Instead of reacting instantly, you breathe. That breath is meditation in motion. That pause is discipline. Over time, the pause becomes natural. You begin to notice that what once triggered you no longer has the same intensity. Situations that once consumed you now pass more quickly. You recover faster. You detach sooner. That is progress. Discipline also means choosing your environment wisely. If you surround yourself with constant outrage, you will internalize outrage. If you engage in endless comparison, you will internalize inadequacy. Guard your inputs. Guard your conversations. Guard your media consumption. Guard your mental diet. The unbothered mind is not careless about what it absorbs. Discipline means accepting discomfort in the short term for stability in the long term. It is uncomfortable not to respond when your ego demands it. It is uncomfortable to admit you are wrong. It is uncomfortable to walk away from drama instead of winning it. But those moments of restraint build internal strength. Imagine lifting weights. The muscle grows during resistance. The mind grows during restraint. If you always give in to impulse, your reactions become stronger than your awareness. If you repeatedly restrain impulse, awareness becomes stronger than reaction. That is the reversal you are aiming for. Eventually, being unbothered is no longer an act. It becomes your baseline. You do not have to pretend calmness. You are calm. You do not have to suppress anger constantly. Anger arises less intensely because attachment has weakened. This is long-term transformation. And understand something important. Discipline does not make you emotionless. It makes you emotionally intelligent. You still feel deeply, but you are not dragged by what you feel. You choose. Choice is the essence of freedom. When reaction is automatic, you have no choice. When awareness precedes reaction, choice appears. That choice is your power. At the highest level, being unbothered is not about how others behave. It is about how trained your mind is. The world will always present challenges. People will always disappoint. Outcomes will always remain uncertain. You cannot discipline the world. You can discipline your response to it. And when your response is stable, the world loses its ability to shake you. That is mastery. Not loud, not dramatic, but deeply unshakable. You do not become unbothered overnight. You become unbothered the moment you decide your peace is worth more than your pride. The world will not stop testing you. People will not stop projecting. Situations will not suddenly become fair, predictable, or perfectly aligned with your preferences. That is not the point. The point is this: you no longer need them to. Detachment is not withdrawal from life. It is participation without dependency. It is loving without clinging, acting without obsessing, caring without collapsing. When you stop demanding that reality behave differently, your suffering decreases. When you stop reacting to every trigger, your power increases. When you stop defining yourself through temporary conditions, your identity stabilizes. The unbothered mind is not numb. It is trained. It is not cold. It is clear. It is not passive. It is disciplined. You can walk through praise without addiction. You can walk through criticism without destruction. You can walk through gain and loss without losing yourself. That is freedom. And freedom is not loud. It does not announce itself. It moves quietly, steadily, without needing approval. If you truly understand these teachings, your life becomes lighter. Not because problems disappear, but because you stop carrying them unnecessarily. Not because people change, but because you stop expecting them to. Observe more. React less. Release quickly. Return to awareness. Let the world move. You remain still.